Hey guys, welcome to She Knows Arsenal. Make sure you guys are liking this video and subscribing to the channel. We have another live show. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about the agent talks between Arsenal and Victor Osimhen, as well as Ivan Toney's preference being Arsenal over Chelsea, and doing a little bit of a Brighton preview, a really important game for Arsenal. Definitely every single game is important. We always have to get the 3 points, but it's important to get back to winning ways. Arsenal lost to Villa, drew to PSV, so it's time to get 3 points and kind of move forward and get back onto in a good rhythm. So we're going to talk about all those things. I'm sorry I don't have any funny videos or anything right now. Like I couldn't think of anything and I didn't want to force it. So like don't hate me. But yeah, and we'll go over like Arteta's press conference and stuff like that and talk about who's available, who's not, keys to the match. Who do we want to see play? Blah, 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 blah. So like I said, there's already 40 of you guys in here, which is amazing. Make sure you guys like this video again, like I said, and subscribe to the channel if you're new, and get into the chat and let me know how you guys are thinking and feeling. Obviously, we have been linked to both Ivan Toney and Victor Osimhen. The interest in Victor Osimhen has been around for a while. If you guys remember, before we got Gabriel Jesus, before we got Gabriel Jesus, we were also interested in Victor Osimhen. And so I'm not surprised that we're linked to him again. If he's available, Arsenal should be in contention for him. He's the best striker, I think, on the market. He's to me the best option if you want to get the most bang for your buck, right? But then you have Ivan Toney, who's going to be available in January, that also a lot of Arsenal fans really like. So I'm going to put a poll out there right now. That's what I'm doing right now. And so you guys can go ahead and vote on if you'd rather Toney in January or Osimhen in the summer. And then you guys can let me know in the chat and say why or why not, because that's super important. So let's see who's all in here. Errol says, evening, Jess. Good evening to you as well. And happy Friday to you. Happy Friday to you as well. I love Fridays because obviously that means like we're playing soon. It's like, okay, we're gearing up for another Arsenal game, William says, start the show, Jess. I was only like it's 12:05. I said I would start. Well, it's 8:05. I said I would start at 8. And I've been talking for 5 minutes, so I was right on time. Lucas says, Jess, what's your prediction for the North London derby? I'm stressed for some reason. For the women, we'll beat them. I know that we didn't necessarily play that well against them in the Conti Cup, but that's because we heavily rotated. And yeah, you could tell that we heavily rotated. I think we'll win. I don't think it'll be that hard. They're not that good. John P says, Disgracia, no funny videos. I know. Shaquille says, hey, Jess, good thing about Toney is he won't do a Mudryk. He won't do what Mudryk did because he knows that this will be probably his last big move and he wants Champions League. Aman says, evening, Jess, and good evening to you as well. Pete Hearn says, think we'll beat them for... Hold on. Bloop. Okay. I always have it up, but I never mute it for some reason. But anyways, let's go back to your comment. Where is it? Okay. I think we'll beat them 4-5-1. Jess, keep faith. I hope so. Fabrizio S says, Jess, what are your thoughts on the 17-year-old center back from Ajax? On my show earlier. If you guys did not catch my show earlier, you missed out. So you guys should go after we're done here, go watch that because I put a lot of effort into it. And I feel like some of you guys missed out on the in-between stuff that I spoke about. I spoke about Jorrel, Hato, as well as Leonardo, or Marcos Leonardo. Talked about both of them. So if you guys didn't watch that, go and watch it after this. But the video is only like 19 minutes long. You have 19 minutes, right? So my feeling on this player is looks like a good player, but you guys know my preference for a defensive reinforcement is Usman Diamande from Sporting. Jorrel Hato looks good. He's 17 years old. He's only played like 30 first team games, but he's already been captain of Ajax. Which is great and shows that he has leadership quality. He looks good. I just I guess my question is, where does that leave Kivior? There's a huge pile up on the left-hand side where Tommy tends to be preferred over there. Timber was preferred over there. Zinchenko plays over there. Kivior doesn't seem to be getting any playing time really on that side at left back. And so he's the big question mark there because, you know, he doesn't seem to be trusted, or maybe Arteta is just slowly betting him in. But to bring in another left-sided center back / left back just feels like somebody would need to go so we can even things out. It would allow Timber to go back on the side that I always thought that he was going to play on, which was the right, so he could give like real good competition to Ben White. So I think when you look at, maybe the two players that would be up for discussion, it would be Kivior and Tomiyasu. Tomiyasu mostly because he can't stay fit, and Kivior because maybe he's not trusted, maybe he needs a loan, whatever, I don't know. But it's all about, whether or not this player is, ready to step up to a club like Arsenal. What could he offer? How much would he cost? What does that do to the players that are already there? But nobody wants to see a defensive signing coming in January. But I personally think we need one. But I think it's actually we need somebody that could actually step in for Saliba or Gabriel. If one of them get injured, we are cooked. If one of them get injured, we are done. Because even if you want to say you could move Ben White there and Kivior there because they're natural center backs or whatever, neither one of them have the physical profile to do anything similar to what Saliba and Gabriel do for us. And so 1 or 2 games is probably okay, but when you get beyond 5, 6, 7 games, we're going to feel it. We're definitely going to feel it. So looks like a decent player, looks like the type of player that Arteta would like. If you like Timber, you'd probably like him too because they have similar qualities, but that would throw into question like the future of Kivior and Tomiyasu to me, because that's a lot of left-sided players. And then also, if you brought in somebody like him, you could start to use Zinchenko in midfield. I do think his position at Arsenal needs to evolve if he's going to stay here, because eventually him playing left back is not going to work. Physically, I was watching some of the clips from Zinchenko from last season. I don't know if you guys have seen this too, but he doesn't look as fit. He doesn't look as fit, quick, sharp. And maybe it's his birthday today, I think. So happy birthday, Zinchenko. But, maybe he's slowing down. And so if he's slowing down, then we will have to evolve his position a little bit, because he's not going to be able to play left back for Arsenal if he's getting older and slower. You know what I mean? So, yeah, sorry, you guys, I have a little bit of a cold. So, but yeah, I think some question marks. If you want to bring in another left-sided center back / left back, that definitely throws into question a couple of players there. But he looks like a good player, Chris says we need to stop playing Kivior at left back. That would be a good start for him. Man's not a fullback. I said that in my show earlier too, that he could just be the case that he's just not able to adapt to that role the way that Ben White did. Ben White adapted to that right back role so easily and so seamlessly. So I guess maybe the assumption was that Kivior could do it as well, but maybe he just doesn't have the capability, and he's literally just a left-sided center back. Maybe that's just the case, Damien says anytime there's a transfer window close, then El Neni will be Jared injured, and make sure he isn't available to be sold. You know what? I'll be really honest with you guys about El Neni. I don't really worry about him needing to be sold. I think El Neni is one of the least of our worries, because he's perfectly happy being fourth down the chain in terms of our DMs or holding midfield options. We're not going to get anything for him. I think he's going to leave on a free in the summer window. So to me, it's like I think they're consciously making the decision to allow him to leave on a free and go on to the next step in his career, blah, blah, blah. So for me, I'm not that worried about El Neni anymore. I'm more concerned about the players that actually are occupying good squad positions that aren't necessarily stepping up to the plate. And do they have value as squad members if we can't trust them to come in, keep us in competitions, and allow us to rotate our players that are starters? I think that's always our main issue. That's not necessarily El Neni. Like El Neni and Cedric, if everybody was fit, wouldn't be making the squad. So it's more about Vieira, ESR, Kivior, like these guys, Reece Nelson, and Kedia. Like those are the ones that I'm like, because they actually could potentially have value. So El Neni doesn't have any value. So that's more of a concern to me than El Neni, you know. But yeah, he does tend to get injured every single time there's a transfer window, right? Leo says Kivior is playing left back because we have no other left back other than Zinni, just in case you haven't noticed. Is that true? Is that true? Because Kivior played left back against Brentford, and we had a left back available to us. Tomiyasu played in that game. Zinchenko was available as well. So I don't know if I necessarily agree with the only reason why Kivior is playing left back. He also played left back towards the end of last season too. So, and there were other people there. So I don't know if I necessarily agree that he's just playing left back because there's nobody else there. It's a conscious choice. Like it is. It's a conscious choice. And I don't think he's just playing there just because. Like we've played him at left back even though there's been other people available, you know. Errol says, your his deal is almost done, Jess. We are not getting Victor Jess for sure. So let's go ahead and talk about that because again, I still feel as though people don't actually get, like, when you sign a new deal, that doesn't mean that you can't be sold, you know. Case in point, Ramsdale. Ramsdale got a new deal and is going to be sold within the next 2 windows. You know, Balogun signed a new deal for Arsenal and left like the next transfer window. So signing a new deal doesn't really mean anything, right? And so this is a report coming out of Get Football News Italy. They're saying that only a few details of Victor Osimhen's new Napoli contract are missing and they will be ironed out soon. Osimhen's agent, Roberto Calenda, had met with Napoli CEO Aurelio De Laurentiis a couple of days ago to speak about formalizing terms of a new deal, and the meeting was rather positive. There's an agreement regarding a new deal. It's close for Osimhen, and the only last few details, blah, blah, blah. The major talking point was the release clause, and the details remaining are now only minor. So again, like I was just saying, just because you sign a new deal doesn't mean anything. Sometimes it's just protecting the value. And I think that that's what Napoli are doing. They're protecting his value and making sure that they get at least 100 million for his sale. And so it's having a release clause automatically shows you that the player is available. You know, the player is available for a certain fee. The release clause will be 130 million euros, but it could also increase depending on certain factors. The Nigerian will extend his deal till 2026, with his current deal running out in the summer of 2025. So this is a more interesting part that you guys are probably like, okay, get on with it. What's actually interesting about this? So the new deal is said to be, so this is for everybody that's like, he's signing a new deal, you can't get him. The new deal is said to be a gentleman's agreement to make sure that Osimhen's exit from the club is peaceful, especially because Arsenal have already made contact with Calenda, who is Osimhen's agent, with Chelsea also interested. So like I said, it means nothing. You're protecting his value. He's going to leave. He probably wants to move to the Premier League, and the most likely places for him to go are Chelsea and Arsenal, 2 teams that are actively looking for a number 9. Right? It's not going to be Manchester City. It probably won't be Manchester United. Newcastle have a couple of, strikers already. It will probably end up being a dogfight between Chelsea and Arsenal. The thing about Chelsea that we do know is that he is like a Chelsea fan. So that gives them a little bit of a leg up. But does he want to play for a club that's kind of like swimming around mid-table? Because they probably won't get Champions League. There's too much competition for the Champions League spots right now. You have Newcastle that are probably going to be knocking on the door, Aston Villa, Spurs. Those teams are way better than Chelsea right now. So the likelihood of them, if they got Europe, I'd be surprised. That would be good for them right now. And that's not to shade them. It is to shade them a little bit, but does he want to go there because of his connection and he loves Chelsea, or does he just go to the other London club that's actually doing better? So again, that goes back to the whole idea that like signing a new deal doesn't really mean anything. It's just to protect the value. And OSIMHEN, I mean, if he stayed at Napoli, I'd be very surprised. I just most players want to test themselves in the Premier League, and that's where the money is. That's where the glitz is. That's where everything is. And it's not like Napoli look that great right now anyway. I mean, they won the Scudetto, and now they're just kind of like trying to figure out life after winning, So it's a really interesting thing right now because I'm not surprised that Arsenal made contact with his agent because I guess they want to see what options they have. I think before you make a decision, you want to see if you have the ability to potentially bring in the top striker signing that you could potentially get, the best player on the market. You want to see if you can get that player. And so of course they would contact OSIMHEN. They probably also talk to Santi Jimenez and Sesko and everybody to survey all the options that they have. Look at everything in January and say, listen, do we feel like we have enough goals in this team to do what we want to do this season? If we feel like we have enough goals in this team to do what we need to do this season, then we wait to the summer and we make the big signing, right? Or do we feel like everything that we want to do this season is based around getting a striker in? If that's the case, then you need to go for somebody like Toney. And Toney also would allow you to use the money, like more money somewhere else. My only fear with the OSIMHEN thing is not that I think he'll bang at Arsenal. I think he'll be fantastic at Arsenal. I think he'll get us the 25 goals that we want. I think he'll play well with Saka and Martinelli. I think he fits right in. I think he's a great investment because he's 24. I think that that's a great signing. But when you look at our team and all the things that we all kind of feel like we need to do, we need a right winger, we need another midfielder, we probably need another center back. Those things will fall by the wayside if we go ahead and trigger his release clause because you have to pay everything up front. So I'm taking that into consideration. I feel like if we were in that position where we had one thing to do, like the team was perfect, but all we needed to do was upgrade upon Nketiah and Gabriel Jesus, that would be perfect. But we're not really there. We're not really there when we only need one thing. And so that's my only worry with the OSIMHEN thing is how is that going to affect Arsenal's ability to get other things done? Because getting a striker, but still having holes in midfield, not having another winger available to you, though that feels a little bit like not like a recipe for disaster, but something that could come back and bite us. So yeah, I think it's a really, really good opportunity that you have if you feel like there's not a lot of other Premier League teams that could actually put up the money for OSIMHEN. This is the time to strike. It's the teams in Europe are not going to be able to afford a 130 million pound release clause or 130 million euro release clause. So that's what makes the Premier League the most likely destination. And if it's just you and Chelsea, then you're in there. You're in there. But, there's other factors too. And I just feel like we have so many things to do. Alistair Ben says, ramen. Oh, yeah, you guys are talking to each other. Prince says, future plans only to end up with nothing. Aman says, Toney for me. Let's see. Damien says, sell to Aston Villa and West Ham. They showed interest. Who are you talking about selling? Ramen says, Jess, would you take Luis Openda from RB Leipzig if you miss out on Ivan Toney and Victor Osimhen next summer? No, because he's short. Here's my thing. It's like we, at the very bottom line, Arsenal need a different profile. If we're going to just bring in somebody that's 5'9", that does similar things to Gabriel Jesus, maybe they're a better finisher, but I don't really feel like that solves our problem. Arsenal need another profile. They need an outlet. They need somebody with some size and physicality. And so the Openda guy, like this Leonardo guy, they're all like the same, 5'9", 5'10", 5'8", whatever. And to me, that doesn't solve our problem. I really do think we need to go for like a Sesko, an OSIMHEN, a Toney. We need a different profile because as much as people don't like Gabriel Jesus and what he offers in the box, he's one of the best false nines you're going to get. And so if you're going to do small striker, just do Gabriel Jesus. He's a good small striker, But Arsenal need a bigger player. They just do, you know? And that's how I feel about it anyway. So no, I wouldn't take him. I wouldn't take him, mostly for the fact that he doesn't offer us anything different in terms of size and physicality and things like that. Anton Dunn says, just go for Toney. There's no guarantee OSIMHEN does anything in the Premier League, and the 100 million plus is not the one when we need to bolster other areas and have more complete squad. Do you guys actually think that OSIMHEN will flop in the Premier League? Do you think that he could flop in the Premier League? I feel it's giving when Rory said that Haaland would flop in the Premier League. I just don't really see OSIMHEN flopping in the Premier League. I really don't. I think he's like a surefire Premier League level striker. Look at the guys who are doing well in the Premier League as strikers: Ollie Watkins, Toney. These guys. Do we really think OSIMHEN's going to come out here and not know how to kick a ball? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like OSIMHEN is definitely going to bang in the Prem. He definitely is. If he gets serviced, he'll be great in the Premier League. So I don't think he'll flop. So this whole you can't guarantee what he's going to do in the Premier League. I think there are players that transcend this idea that you need to be Premier League proven. Haaland was one of them. Anybody who thought Haaland was not going to do well in the Premier League was smoking high grade. They really were, because he was always going to be really good, right? So for me, I think he would do fine in the Premier League. And let's see. Aegon is saying Lukaku. Lukaku was already in the Premier League. He was, what did he go? Was he at West Brom? He was at Chelsea. He was at Man United. I think that's a completely different thing. When Lukaku is not even on the same level as OSIMHEN. Are we saying that we think Lukaku is on the same level as OSIMHEN? Nah. OSIMHEN to me is beyond them, really. But in terms of needing to bolster other areas, I totally agree with you on that one, 100%. Like, we're not going to get anything. It's not like getting Declan Rice, because with Declan Rice, we're Klarna. We're paying in installments. You know, we're paying in like 4 or 5 big payments. With OSIMHEN, you're going to have to pay that all up front, and that is going to hinder us. We're Arsenal, you know. We have money, but we don't have money. You know, we're not rich. You know. Like that. So it is going to affect what we're going to have left to do other things with. And so, yeah, I totally agree with that. Sakin Saj says, also Everton Lukaku was very good, lost his hunger from United onwards, plus OSIMHEN is better technically. Cyrus says OSIMHEN is a workhorse, cannot flop in the Premier League. Damien says, totally agree, Jess. Feed OSIMHEN and he will eat and leave no crumbs. Lucas says OSIMHEN is more athletic and technical than Lukaku. John P says, wait till the summer and get OSIMHEN. We need 2 defenders now. We definitely need at least 1 defender. Like, I'm very concerned about seeing Declan Rice playing center back and feeling like, okay, we're looking at solutions, because if we're looking at solutions, there's probably some sort of inkling that somebody could potentially have an injury. And here, like, maybe I'm just projecting, but Saliba hasn't looked like his self the last couple of games. And the first thing I thought after, like, you know, we played against he wasn't that great against Lens. He was okay against Luton. He you know, he wasn't like his usual self. First thing I thought is his back hurting him? You know, and now Declan Rice is being looked at as an option there. So you're going to remove your best midfielder out of that position in order to, you know, we need a defender. I know it's not sexy, you guys, but we need one, you know. We need to go get somebody for real, because every single season, everything, like, our hopes and dreams have crumbled off of the back of a defender getting injured. You know what I mean? And so as much as I know that we're concerned about if we have enough goals or the midfield or whatever, nothing will happen. Like, nothing will happen if we don't have a solid defense. Nothing. Sample says Saliba has not been himself ever since Wahi harassed him and gave him a reality check. Yeah, I mean, I think Wahi did a really good job against Saliba, but I would not be surprised if Saliba was carrying a little injury. Chris says, this is our time. We need Stan and Josh to invest some of their money for once. Tired of the so close but not quite nonsense we're always on. It always feels like we're a couple of players short, you know? So I totally understand that. And I do think that they'll give us money, but, you know, we also don't sell well. There's so many different factors here. It's not just about Stan and Josh giving us more money. Edu has to hold up his end of the bargain too. He has to recoup some money back. You can't just continuously spend. There's FFP. So Stan and Josh can give you money. They can and they will. But players like the players that people are afraid to even look at to sell, the likes of Emile Smith-Rowe, we have to look at Nketiah, you need to look at Ramsdale, all these players that have a little bit of value, we need to extract that. You're not getting anything for Cedric. You're not getting anything for El Neni. Those players are not going to get you anything. You're probably not going to get anything for Sambi, Nuno, or anybody else. Anybody that's out on loan, you're probably going to get nothing for them. So you also have to get around to the reality that we're going to have to sell some of these guys, right? And you can only sell if they have value. The best sell that we've ever done, or the most recent sale that we've done, is Willock. Every once in a while, people will pretend like we're missing out on Willock. Do you really feel like we're missing out on Willock? He's been basically missing this entire season. I love Willock, don't get me wrong. But that 25 million that we got, we need to do more of that. We need to do more of that for sure. Lucas says we need to get good money for KT, Ramsdale, ESR, Nketiah, and Partey. Damien says, are we broke? Why Arteta trying Declan Rice at center back when Arteta bought Kivior? I mean, maybe because he doesn't want to play two left-sided center backs. I think if Saliba goes down, you want somebody that's right-footed playing on that side. I think it's awkward when you have two left-footers on. You can play it. We've played that before. We played Kivior and Gabriel together at the end of last season, so it could work. But I think, you want a right-footer next to a left-footer to get that balance, and we don't have Tomiyasu. Tomiyasu being injured, once again, is a big blow for Arsenal because he can cover every single position in the back line. So right now you just have Saliba. That's all you have. The next player that's up is Declan Rice. And seeing that really, 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 really scared me. I was like, he could do it, but do I want him back there? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Alistair Ben says, I think we need another left back or a right back, especially if Timber is not going to be fit. Sikin Sojay says, if they have another transfer window like last Jan, it'll tell me that they're not really serious about getting over the line. Need elite level quality now, not squad fillers. Chris Fraser says, that's true regarding Edu, but the Cronkies only let him use the club's own money. They never invest their own personal funds. Come on, Josh, do us a solid. Fair enough. John P says, we made 70 million from Champions League. That will help for Jan. We had to loan Raya this summer, but that money is in. So that's 2 or 3 players worth of first payments. Aman says we place Willock with Odegaard. We need to do more of that. Because I know it doesn't feel good. I think that's like the main thing is it doesn't feel good to sell some of your players to Premier League rivals, or you don't want to see your ex players doing well somewhere else. It's like seeing your ex having, being with somebody new, you don't, and being happy. Nobody wants that, right? But if we're actually the Arsenal that we think we are, we should feel confident selling ESR to Aston Villa. We should, Willock to Newcastle. Aston Villa could get Emile Smith-Rowe. Sell Reece Nelson to Brighton. Because at the end of the day, if we're who we are, it won't hurt us. But the only way that you're going to get big fees as well is to sell to the Premier League. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. If we had sold Balogun to a Premier League team, we probably would have got 40 million, 50 million maybe. But because we decided to sell to, outside the Premier League, we got almost 20 million less. But I know people did not want to see Balogun potentially tearing it up in the Premier League. And I feel like that's a little bit of insecurity. City have no qualms about selling their dead wood to other Premier League teams. Raman says, I think ESR will succeed somewhere like Brighton or Villa. I do too. Aegon says, I'd rather sell Vieira than ESR. Vieira will get more time because he's an Arteta signing. Leo says, oh, you guys are talking to each other. Damien says, Diamande. Social Join says, that's not how money works. That CL money is probably bonuses, operating costs. Lucas says, we were ready to spend on Mudryk and Caicedo. What do you guys mean we didn't try to spend? I think, people feel like we should have, put more money up to get those players. That time was very stressful because we were in the January transfer window. We were in the title race. We lost out to Chelsea for Mudryk, and then we didn't get Caicedo, and we ended up with Jorginho, and we ended up with Trossard as well. So I think people just were like, Arsenal just did not want to spend the money, but we tried to spend 85 million on Mudryk, and I think when you look back on it, like even from my perspective, like somebody who is like very frustrated by not getting Mudryk, we would have been spending 90 million plus on a player that look what he looks like at Chelsea. He was never worth that amount. So Arsenal wanting to spend 85 million and Chelsea wanting to spend 90 something million on him and give him higher wages, I don't really think means that Arsenal were not competitive and did not want to spend the money. They just didn't feel like he was worth that. And I personally, I think his agent sold him there for a specific reason. I think he wanted him to go to Chelsea. So, and they were desperate to make that deal work. So that's whatever. The Jorginho thing, we tried to buy Caicedo. They didn't want to do business. They didn't want to do business. And at a certain point, you do have to walk away, because if Brighton are like, we don't want to give you 80, we don't want to do 80 million. Do you guys really think Caicedo would have been worth 100 million? Based on what you've seen, sometimes you have to have morals and standards, and I get that it's Jorginho. I mean, the meltdown I had when we bought Jorginho was like, my head was on Pluto. Okay. I was pissed. But I can understand the club having a line that they won't cross. And when it's a player that they actually felt like was worth it, they went out and spent the money on Declan Rice. And he has proven to have been the player that we should have been spending north of 80 million on, where the other two players that we would have been spending more than that on have done absolutely nothing in the shirts that they're in now, at the club that they're at now. So I totally understand what you guys are saying. I don't necessarily feel like Arsenal just did not want to spend the money and they're cheap and they don't care and all this kind of stuff. But in January, it's really difficult. If they don't want to sell one of their best players, or, they're really holding them for ransom. Like, if you want Douglas Luiz, do you actually think we should go to Aston Villa right now and give them 100 million for Douglas Luiz? Do you think he's a 100 million pound player? Do you think Arsenal should just do it because we just need you know what I mean? You have to have some morals and standards at some point, The right player, if it's the right player, Arsenal will spend the money. We've seen that with Declan Rice, and they've been absolutely justified because he's the only player that's justified his price tag. So, yeah. Marco says it took OSIMHEN a few months to get going in Serie A. He'd bang in the EPL, but would go through a 2-3 month period of being bantered mercilessly. As long as he banged at some point, that's all that matters. John P says, Jess, will the Marcos Leonardo meltdown be worse than your Jorginho one? Abso-freaking-lutely. I do not want that guy. I am so sorry, but if your compilation stinks, that's the best you got. That's the best you got. It's giving Marquinhos. It's giving Marquinhos. Alistair Ben says, would you take Calvin Phillips if we could get him on a really cheap from City? No, I wouldn't. No, thank you. Chris Fraser says, we dodged a massive bullet with Mudryk, but Caicedo would have cooked in our team, in my opinion, but never worth 110 million. That's a madness. Absolutely crazy. And there's life after losing out on players. Look at Liverpool. They missed out on both Lavia and Caicedo, and they're flying, and Chelsea are in the dumpster. So there's life after it. I know it's difficult. Like, even I have a very difficult time, like, coming to grips with losing out on players to rivals, but there's life after it. And at the end of the day, some players just aren't worth the money that people are or want. And you have to have a line. You just have to at some stage, right? So let's talk a little bit about Toney, who I think is probably the most realistic option that we have in January if we want to get a striker for real. But listen, he does not want to go to Chelsea, or that's what the rumor is on the street. Fabrizio Romano said on Ivan Toney is that this is a rumor I'm hearing, that his preference in terms of a top club move in January or the summer would be to go to Arsenal. From what I'm hearing, Ivan Toney could be really excited by the possibility of joining Arsenal. Of course he would. He's twerking, okay? He was watching the Luton game and was like, oh, Declan Rice, that's so great. Like, he is definitely twerking. He wants to come to Arsenal. And when he said it in like the Diary of a CEO or whatever that was, and he was like, oh, I love the way Arsenal play, blah, blah, blah. He's already spoken to Mikel Arteta. Like, he wants to come to Arsenal. I think it's just whether or not Arsenal really want him. whether or not Arsenal actually want him or they'd rather wait for OSIMHEN. You know, Toney is a good option that does a lot for you, but Arsenal to want to wait for the perfect signing. So I don't know if Toney will get the move or not because, you know, if you have a chance to get OSIMHEN, you got to go do that. You know what I mean? But again, if you don't feel like we're going to have enough goals, right? And you don't want to go to the Etihad and, and no, Anfield will already be over, but you don't want to go to the Etihad and Old Trafford and shit without like a striker that's going to, give us a little bit of like fear factor. Like I love Jesus. You guys know I love Jesus, but I do think that like teams, the top 5% are not afraid of Gabriel Jesus. They're just not. He doesn't occupy the center backs. Do I want to say he gets bullied? Is that wrong to say? Like he just ends up, it almost feels like we don't have anybody up there, And so what ends up happening is like Saka and Martinelli suffer, and then we really struggle to score goals and really impose ourselves against the better sides, especially away from home with Jesus in the team. And like I'm really not trying to shade him because you guys know I love him to death, but those are the 5% of the games that if we don't win them or we don't get anything from them, we don't win the title. We don't. We still got to go to Tottenham, Old Trafford, the Etihad. We still have to go to some big grounds, and we still have to host some big teams as well at the Emirates. So I don't really want to go into those games feeling like we're not going to have any attack. You know what I mean? And so that's what Arsenal have to grapple with. Go with Toney. You have extra funds available because you won't have to use it all on one player, but he's not going to give you the star quality that OSIMHEN gives you, and that's just on period. This also came from Sean Casey. He said that Arsenal and Chelsea are fighting it out for Ivan Toney. Arsenal are offering a loan with an obligation. Chelsea are offering cash plus players. Cash plus players. Ivan Toney's preferred move is to Arsenal. So the preference of a player is always more important than anything else. If they want to go to a certain club, they'll make it happen. And we have a good relationship with Brentford, and I'm sure a loan with an obligation would probably fit their needs a little bit better than money with cash plus players. Cash plus players rarely ever works, but a loan with an obligation, I think, really would suit them a lot better. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm not surprised that Toney would rather go to Arsenal. We're not a dumpster fire. we're almost top of the league, and Chelsea are somewhere swimming around with, Fulham in them, So I'm not surprised that he'd prefer us over them. You know what I mean? It feels good to be loved, doesn't it? Doesn't it feel good to be loved and preferred? I remember a day where nobody would want to come to Arsenal. So, John P says, Jess, oh yeah, you already said that. Sorry, I already read it. Aegon says, sell Eddie, Partey, Ramsdale, and Vieira, and we're good. Taku says, will you marry me? No, I cannot. But with his knowledge of football, my life will be complete. Why spend money during the weekends if we could sit in Arsenal jersey and watch football? That's so nice. Thank you so much for that. But I cannot marry you, unfortunately. But some nice girl will, I'm sure. Let's see. Barry Burns said, would you give give up ESR and 30 million to get Luis from Villa? Listen, I would sell ESR. So I don't necessarily, it doesn't really have anything to do with Douglas Luiz. I would sell him to Aston Villa. Period. I don't really want Douglas Luiz that bad. I'm not really desperate for Douglas Luiz. I'm not really desperate for Paulinho. So, but I guess maybe, but I would just sell ESR. Personally, for me, he's somebody on the bubble. Like if somebody offered 30, 40 million for him, I'd probably snap your hand off for it because I personally don't think he will be fit enough to play often. And he's also doesn't really, I don't know, you guys. I feel like we're still talking about ESR from 2021, and that was a long time ago. It really was. So for me, he's somebody that I would, if you gave me 30, 40 million, I would probably get rid, not because I don't think he's talented, but, how much longer are we going to wait for him to meet the, the hype? How long are we going to wait? I would purely just sell to Aston Villa. I don't even have to get Douglas Luiz in return. That might sound harsh, but I like ESR, but do I feel like he's pivotal to everything that we're doing and like we actually have to keep him? No, because I think there's other players that we could have in that position that would actually suit us a lot better. That would also be more available. Everybody who's injury prone, I would probably sell them. I just feel like relying upon players that are unreliable just seems like, you know, stupidity. You know what I mean? So yeah, I wouldn't do it. Jacobs, thank you so much for your super chat. Says for me, if not Toney, then we could fill in elsewhere. Um, yeah, no, I hear you. I think the thing about Toney too is like he's just. I don't think everybody's gonna be like sold on Toney. That's fine. Um, and but what he allows you to do is fill in other positions elsewhere, and to me, that's so important. Like I just feel like we need too much, and Toney would allow you to do other things, and even other strikers like the Santiago Jimenez and Sesko, like all of those options would allow you to do other things as well. So even if it's not Toney, you just won't be spending 100 million in one swoop. That's a lot of freaking money. But thank you so much for your super chat. Um, I know people are gonna hate me for the ESR. John P says I would be happy with that PSV winger that destroyed Kivior's Arsenal. Bakayoko, man. I'm sorry, but when when Serginho Dest flip-flopped on Kivior, I almost had to turn the game off because I was like, Serginho Dest is one of my least favorite US men's national team players. Like I actively have an agenda and hate on him. For Kivior to allow him to flip flap on him, I was dead. I was like, and then everybody on the sideline was like, oh my God. Like, I mean, when we talk about a Hall of Shame level performance, Kivior definitely put that in against PSV. He was just getting cooked by anybody that stepped up. It was like, you want to cook him? Go ahead. There was like a line to cook him. Anybody who got up next to him went by him. It was really not a good performance, right? But I do like the Bakayoko guy. I think that's the type of signing that, Liverpool makes, and we're trying to figure out why we didn't do it. I don't care about hype and like, players that have like a lot of like Twitter following. I don't really care about that. He's strong, he's fast, he worked really hard, he got past his man, he took shots. Like he's a dangerous player that looks like a Premier League level player to me. And so if you're going to spend 30, 40 million on an attacker, get him and send Reece Nelson the other way. I would love to do that. Anton Dunn says Toney is the move. OSIMHEN is the final piece to the puzzle, and we're not close to that somehow. Yeah, I think we thought we were there. I think at the end of last season, I think we thought, oh, we only need like one more midfielder and a striker, and we're done. And it's weird to feel like after feeling like we only need two players, we actually feel now that we need like 4 or 5. You know what I mean? Like I get exactly what you're saying, and I think it's because of the decisions that we made over the summer. It's because Xhaka left and we brought in Havertz. And again, if I had to go back in time, like I would not have spent the 70 million on Havertz, despite loving what he's doing right now. I would have spent that 70 million on an attacker. I think we're a lot closer to where we want to be spending that 70 million on a striker than spending it on Havertz. You know what I mean? But Arteta clearly saw something, and but now it feels like we've maybe undone a little bit of the work, but listen, maybe Arteta has a grand master plan that I can't see. Chris Fraser says, low key, keep an eye on the other PSV winger, Jorb Vertessen, the one that scored against us, right? Quietly becoming a great winger, can play on either wing. Here to there says, whatever is done has to be an immediate contributor. This window needs to be treated as a make or break. Lucas says, who remembers Dest, Max Aaron's debates in 2021? I remember when people wanted Dest at Arsenal, and I continuously said, if you don't like Bellerin, you're not going to like Dest. He doesn't even have the speed. He didn't even have the Bellerin-ness. Like, he's very much so in a place that suits him. The Eredivisie, that is his level. And I don't need to say much more than that. Benny says the maximum number of loans registerable in the same season is 4, and under no circumstances shall more than one be from the same club at one time. I've heard this as well, but I wonder if there's a loophole if you make the signing permanent, and I wonder if that's why we went ahead and said that we're going to make David Raya permanent. I don't know what the loophole is behind, all of that. If we end up saying like he's going to be permanent, then does that change anything? I'm not sure. But I would imagine if Arsenal are really interested in Toney, they would have known what the rules are in order to get him into the club with also having Raya. And so we'll see how that all works out. But I don't think any of us really understand the rules and like the loopholes behind what we can read. And so I just don't think Arsenal would be even considering Toney in January if they had brought Raya in. You know what I mean? Ramen says Chelsea defender Axel Disasi is reportedly a transfer target for Bayern Munich as his future looks in doubt just a few months after he joined the club. I told everybody that he was going to be trash. Like, oh, Disasi, he played with Badiashile. It's going to be great. I remember when we were linked with Disasi. We were linked with Disasi and Gabriel Magalhaes at the same time, and so was Manchester United. And I remember watching him and thinking, that guy is going to give away a lot of goals. He's a bozo. Like, I don't want him anywhere near Arsenal. And he's proven himself to be that. He was somebody that Chelsea brought in to make up the numbers when they got the injury to Fofana. He's not good. Like, he's really not good. Badiashile is good. Caldwell will probably come good. Fofana was good. I don't know what he'll be post 2 ACLs. But that guy, if you're... Hold on. I don't know. Everybody always calls me as soon as I'm about to do a show. But yeah, I could have told you that. I could have told you that. Let me just text her back. Hey, I'm doing a show. Can I call you back? All right, bye. That was my best friend. Sorry, you guys. But yeah, Simon Bond says, "Let's speculate. Let me speculate. OSIMHEN is unlikely to go to mid-table and far from CL Chelsea." I mean, I could not imagine, unless he's just so desperate to go there, him going there in the state that they're in right now. Blaze says, question, Jess Mbomo is injured. Do you think Brentford would sell Toney in January? Yeah, I do. Leo says, Jess, if we don't have Havertz, who would you have been playing in the role now? Our 4 midfielders are all injured. If we don't have Havertz, I mean, the thing is like, even if you didn't, like, let's say we didn't even spend the money, we didn't spend on a striker, and we just spent it on a different type of midfielder, we still have a midfield issue. We do have, to figure out those profiles. I think we have way too many DMs. We don't have enough 8s, so for me, I would have just, if we didn't spend it on a striker or something like that, we could have still spent it on somebody that fills, I guess, one of those roles, because I don't think I don't know. I get what your point is. Like, okay, well, if we haven't bought Havertz, then we wouldn't have a midfielder available to us and all this kind of stuff. I hear that. But I feel like that's like revisionism based on what's going on right now. Ultimately, if we had bought a striker, I just feel like we would have been closer to where we want to be, regardless to how many injuries we got and stuff like that. Those are, to me, two different conversations. Nobody could have, I don't think anybody would have thought that we would have had like Thomas Partey and ESR out, Fabio Vieira out all at the same time. Like, I don't think we really would have anticipated all of those players to be out at one time. You know what I mean? But my main point is that when we're talking about if we're going to be close to where we're going to be, having a striker in this team, I think we would have felt closer to being like 1 or 2 players away, where now that we bought Havertz and he's neither a midfielder or a striker, we still feel like we have a couple of different, we need a different midfield profile. We still need the striker because Havertz is not a striker. We still need a defender. We still need this. Do you know what I mean? But I totally understand what you're saying about if we had not bought Havertz, we would have been in a bad situation because we have all these injuries. I understand that, but I feel like those are 2 different conversations. But I hear your point. Aegon says, do you think Vieira is just another Sambi? I think in general, Arsenal have a difficult time with players that aren't coming into the first 11. So players that aren't coming into the first 11 that are not experienced players always fall by the wayside. So Nuno, Sambi, Vieira, and Kivior are all players that haven't come into the first 11 and still need developing and are young players. and not a single one of them look like they're going to make it at Arsenal. But, we bought Trossard and Jorginho, and they've been able to do a job, probably because they don't need any development. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it. I think players that come in and they all can't, except for, actually, all four of them came from different leagues as well. Like, players, different league, young, need development, but aren't starters. All, like, that is still, to me, a area of improvement, because if you're not going to have the time to develop them and integrate them into the team properly, then you're just wasting money. You might as well go get somebody that is more experienced or has been in the league before, you know, you know what I mean? So I think that Vieira may end up being a Sambi. Vieira, Kivior, all of them are probably all players that aren't going to make it. Not because they don't have any talent, but we don't, like, Arteta doesn't have time to develop them and integrate them in, because he's always using that first 11. And if you're not Trossard and you're not Jorginho, two players that have played in the league before and are vastly experienced, you tend to you're falling by the wayside. So yeah, Vieira could very much, he could end up being a Sambi. To me, I do think that it's a little bit of a blind spot for Mikel Arteta, being able to manage the squad with players that need developing. He could have players that are experienced, they're fine, but players that still need developing or adaptation, they're not gonna make it. Nabil says, Jess, I did say in the previous live chat that we wouldn't be able to get Toney on loan. I have a suspicion because of Premier League ruling. Anyway, I think we get OSIMHEN in the summer and Garassi in January. I haven't really done any digging on the Garassi guy. I know he's doing really well in the Bundesliga, but what is he? He's an older striker. He didn't sign a new deal, something like that. I've only read like little bits and pieces, so I'm not about to sit here and act like I'm an expert. But I cannot imagine that Toney, like, wouldn't Fabrizio Romano know that? Fabrizio Romano is like, oh, Toney would be interested in going to Arsenal in January. Wouldn't that be a non-conversation, like, an Ornstein or a Fabrizio? People that are reporting on this, wouldn't they know it? There has to be something, a loophole or something. I cannot imagine that Arsenal would have brought in Raya and be talking to Toney about a January move, knowing that, like, within, like, the Premier League ruling, we could not bring him in. But maybe we have, and we're dumb, A cow says we shouldn't have bought Vieira, not for 35 million, a total unwarranted expenditure. He won't succeed in the EPL. I think where I kind of disagree with people is it's not about him not being able to play in the EPL. I think when you have a pattern of players that look good, like players that we know are talented, that we've seen are talented and have a lot of backing, like Sambi had a lot of backing, so did Fabio Vieira and Kivior, and they're all not making it. I feel like that's more an environment thing than a personal thing. I can't imagine that you made 4 bad signings, and because it's all been similar, where they're not in the starting 11, they came from other leagues, they've needed adaptation and development, and they've all fallen by the wayside. And Arteta's just slowly stopped using them until they're out the team. So yeah, for me, I don't think I do think Vieira could play for a Premier League team. I think people make a lot of his size, but there are other players in the Premier League that are small just like him, and they're fine. So to me, it's more about the inability to develop players that are not in that first 11. They all fall by the wayside, no matter if they're Nuno Tavares, Sambi, Vieira, and now it looks like also Kivior. They just immediately lose confidence. They start off okay, and then they just fall off of a cliff. Kivior is not playing bad because he's not a good player. He looks like a player without confidence, and I've seen that before. Here to There says, considering how poor Raya has been, the obligation truly must be ironclad, or Raya is related to Mikel. I just think they want to give him time to actually, like, for me, it's like nobody would ever consider a player a flop in their first, like, 4 months at a club, but only Arsenal fans consider players that don't come straight in and wow them flops. If Arsenal listened to Arsenal fans after, Odegaard's first, loan spell of 6 months, they wouldn't have bought him, so you need more than just like 2, 3, 4 months. I don't think they're going to just not get him just because he wasn't good in the first 4 months that he's been here. Because they fully feel like he's gonna, come good. So yeah, I totally understand what you guys are saying. Like, people would probably want to send him back to Brentford, but you know, the public opinion from Arsenal for me tends to be like Arsenal fans have very unrealistic expectations, never really take into consideration the environment, confidence, things like that. And if you don't hit the ground running, you are a flop. Like, everybody's doing an about face on Kai Havertz now. Nobody gave him more than a couple of games before they called him a flop and said that we had made a mistake. Like, even I felt like, oh my gosh, like this is actually probably not going to work. Now, a couple of days on, a little bit more confidence, and boom, he's fine. Nobody wants to sell him now. So, yeah. Emilio says, Jess, when will Chelsea be back to glory? Do you think it will take 7 years like you took for Arsenal to play in the Champions League? I don't care about Chelsea. They can stay where they are for the rest of my life. Like, that would be totally hilarious if that ownership change is all it took for them to go down the tubes. Yeah, I really don't care what happens with Chelsea. Long live where they are right now. John P says, I still like Fabio. He needs to play regular, which probably means he has to leave. Exactly. Aman says Raya will get more time. He will. Alistair Ben says Vieira is just a victim of Arsenal's success. If we had signed him 2 years before, he would have got to play more. Vieira has shown that he is a good player. Yeah, I don't think all of these players are just bad. I don't. Like, even Sambi, when he first came in, he was a lot better than what he ended up being. I feel like people forget, like, he actually, because Thomas Partey got injured in preseason, Sambi actually started off that season. He played, I think he played against Brentford. I think he played against Chelsea as well, like at home when we lost 2-0, and he actually did a good job. But once you get on the bench and you know that you have no way of breaking into the first 11, because let's be totally real right now. Like, I'm actually just going to put this down because we also need to do a preview. So after this, we need to actually get into the preview because we're losing time. But is there actually competition for places at Arsenal? And let's be totally freaking for real. Be freaking for real. Do we actually have competition for places? People that play well, do they actually feel like they have a chance of starting the next game? Be honest. Do they? No, they don't. Emil can play good for 4 or 5 games. It won't matter. Odegaard comes straight back in. Vieira knows if he plays well, he's back on the bench as soon as the starters are there, back on the bench. Saka, never getting displaced. Martinelli, never getting displaced. When Jesus is fit, he plays no matter what. No matter what. Trossard was playing really well last season, and the moment that Jesus could walk, Trossard was out of that team. There are no competitions for places. I think the only player that probably was going to come in and do anything was Timber. And Tomiyasu has did a good job, but beyond that, like from midfield forward, there's no competition for places. There's no competition for places. When Sambi was playing well, as soon as Thomas Partey came back in, he was dropped and he never saw the light of day again. So he knows that even if he has a good cameo here and there, he's never going to play. There's no competition for places at Arsenal, and there's very little meritocracy. Arteta has done better at using the squad in terms of, like, he has players that he can trust when his starters are not available. But is Jorginho winning a spot? No. Does Trossard? Trossard gets dropped. Even when he's playing well, he gets dropped. There is no competition for places. So if you're a young player that needs development and adaptation, but even if you play well, you're not going to get the spot, that's a very difficult situation to be in. It's a very difficult position to be in. So I just feel like if Arteta is going to be like this, where there really isn't a meritocracy and he just has a starting 11, then the players that are on the bench need to be experienced players that can come straight in, because young players are not going to do well in that environment. Look at, like, they probably would do better at like a Brighton or somewhere like that, where they often rotate. Brighton rotate every single week. And even if you play well, you're going to play again. At Arsenal, you can play well, you're dropped the next game, so it is what it is. It really, really is. So I just think Arteta needs to recruit players that could actually, Premier League level players, experienced players, that could step straight in. And if they're on the bench, they don't feel like it's the end of the world. You know what I mean? But for Sambi and Nuno and Vieira and Kivior, yeah, that shit probably doesn't feel good. Leo says every successful team has a starting 11. They do have a starting 11, but there's still competition for places at some level. There's still an opportunity where if you get a spot, if you get a chance and you take it, you can start. That doesn't happen at Arsenal. In fact, like there are teams that are like Manchester City and Liverpool are actually in the top 5 of teams that have had different starting 11s like this season. They are. So you can, like, it's not just because Arsenal are a good team. It's not. There is an equal, there is a way that you can have players adapt, like, and still have like mostly your starting 11. Like I've always said, light rotation is just something we don't do. We either have our starting 11 or we have a team full of guys that have never played together. But it wouldn't hurt you to have Kivior play 2 or 3 games with the starting 11. It wouldn't kill you to have Fabio Vieira to play 3 or 4 games with the starting 11. So yeah, you have your best 11, but there you have to still integrate players in and have them adapt. And you can't do that if you only get 20 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 5 minutes there. And if you play well and you keep getting dropped, that just it kills your confidence. It kills your confidence. So you can have a starting 11, but that does not mean that players cannot be in that starting 11 and not be like the starter, if that makes sense. Like Reece Nelson could play 3 or 4 games with the starters. He could. He'll never get that chance. He'll never get that chance. So for me, it's not so much about every single game we have to have different players in. But do I think that Kivior couldn't play 3 or 4 games on the trot? No, I think he could. I do. I think he could. You also have to play players in the right position because Kivior just may not be a left back. Sambi could not play in a single pivot, but Arteta continuously played him in a single pivot. That did not suit him. Also, freaking Fabio Vieira is a number 10. He's never going to be able to play like an 8, a box-to-box number 8. So yeah, I feel for me, that's just my little gripe. That's my little gripe is that if you're going to bring in players that need development, they're always going to fail because they don't get runs of games. Arteta doesn't trust them to play 3 or 4 games on the trot, rain or shine. I don't know if he may not feel like he can afford it, and that's fine. But then you need to bring in Trossards and Jorginhos, guys that even if they do get dropped or they don't start, they don't like it, they're experienced. So you know what I mean? That's all I'm saying. Blaze says, Jess, you are not nice to Kivior. Have pity for him, even if Des cooked him. I actually love Kivior. I just feel like he got cooked, and that's just the truth, Amelia says, just why are Arsenal women more popular than the men's team? Arsenal's fan base is so strong. Arsenal women are not more popular than Arsenal men. Don't know where you're getting that information from. Leo says, people complain when Kivior played a dead rubber game against PSV. People complain when Kivior played a dead rubber game against PSV. Alistair Ben says, every top team struggles to get in young players like at Arsenal. That's what the League Cup is used for. Yeah, but you still see players get runs of games. You still see there's like a plan for them. You still see those things. So I feel like it's a cop-out. I feel like a lot of Arsenal fans just kind of feel like this is just how things go. But it's really not. Like I've seen Harvey Elliott get runs of games. I've seen Curtis Jones get runs of games. I've seen Rico Lewis get runs of games. Like you've seen that before, not just in the League Cup, but in the league with the starters. If you just leave them on the bench and only allow them to play in cups, they're not going to develop. There's just not enough league games, and you end up playing with guys you've never played with before. So, and then you just like Fabio Vieira, these kind of guys, they're usually like, they're kind of like useless to us when we really need them because they haven't played enough. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. You guys can argue with me. That's fine. But for me, it's an area of improvement. And let's be real, Arteta at this like infancy of his career, let's keep it real. Like it's very out of the realm of possibility that he's perfect at everything. So I'm not saying he's terrible. I'm not saying he can't get better at it. I'm not saying that Fabio Vieira and Kivior and these guys don't have some culpability, but if you're not going to give them runs of games with the better team, then they're never going to develop. And when you need them, their confidence is going to be shot. They're going to be cold. And then people are going to expect them to play like wonder kids and perfect when that's not really how the world works. You need runs of games. You need 3 or 4 games on the trot, to get your feet underneath you. But we need to talk about Brighton because Brighton is tomorrow, right? Play tomorrow. It's going to be an interesting game, I believe. Let's see what's going on. Yeah, interesting game because Brighton always beat us at home, or they have done in like the last 2 times or whatever. And so if they beat us again, that's 3 on the trot at home where we haven't been able to beat Brighton. Last season, I'll say that I do feel like that was more to do with like Arsenal not feeling confident. Like we were at the end of the title race. We had already kind of bottled it in a way. And so, and they were like really up for it. They knew we were there for the taking. I think that game actually gave them like guaranteed European football, I think. So we were kind of like there to be got, we really were. So you lose that game 3-0 and it was like title done. I think at that point we had to like it to stay in it. We had to beat Nottingham Forest in the next game and we didn't do it. We lost 1-0. So I think that was more due to like feeling fatigued and like over the title race more than like we can't compete with Brighton. We know we can compete with Brighton, but I think we also struggle against teams that play a similar style to us. I think that's why we've always struggled with Manchester City under Mikel Arteta, and we've also struggled against Brighton, as they can pop it around us just as fast as we can pop it around them. So De Zerbi is an uncomfortable opponent, I would say. But Arsenal are in good form. They are not. Brighton are in a little bit of a patchy form, which makes sense because they're in Europe for the first time and they're really focusing on that. They just played yesterday. Yeah, they just played yesterday. So they played yesterday, and I think João Pedro scored like a last minute goal for them to help them go to the next round of 16 or something in the Europa League. So they're on in a good way. They're in a good place. But we played on like Tuesday, and we played like a very rotated squad. So I expect us to be much fresher than them. And like I said, they score a goal in every single game. So they're a dangerous side. They always score goals. Their system helps them create goals and openings and open play chances and all that kind of stuff. But they concede in every single game as well. They have not kept a clean sheet yet. And so coming to the Emirates, they should be more tired than us. They're in worse form than us, and we're in a better place than them. So I expect us to win this game. I really do. But they are an awkward opponent, and any time that they're a bogey team, so we have to figure out a way to get over it, like we did against Everton this season. We have to figure out a way to get over it. We have to get one over on them, right? And so this is it. This is it. As far as I'm concerned. Oh yeah, people are saying we play on Sunday. Sorry. Boy says, Mitoma is gonna rock our right back's world. Richard says we need to play the sort of game we did versus Villa, but hit the back of the net at least twice. Blaze says, Jess, do you remember we played against the midfield, Sambi as DM and 2 8s, ESR and Odegaard, Partey and Tierney were injured. Also, Xhaka played left back. Don't even remind me. Barry says Brighton defensively in Premier League have been very open. They don't do well with crosses and corners and things like that as well. So that could be something that we use to our advantage. Here to there says must win versus Brighton, a loss, and then a loss at Anfield and Liverpool will be well ahead of us. Every game is a must win game for Arsenal at this stage. Boy says even old foggy managers who won't get to play youngsters for the best years are giving youngsters debuts. Alistair Ben says most young players get their chance because of injuries and there's no number one to play. I don't know, you guys. I don't know. I'll be really honest with you guys. I think Arteta could do better integrating these players that he brought in for decent fees. He could help them adapt a little bit better. When you have multiples, that the same thing kind of happens to them where they start off confident and their confidence goes away and then they don't play. I think that's more of a management environment issue than their actual quality, but that's just me. Jay Wick says 1-0 to the Arsenal. You mark my words. So let's talk a little bit about what Arteta said in his press conference. Yeah. Press conference. Basically where Arteta lies. He loves a lie, this man. So he basically, they talked about the FA charges and stuff like that. I think we can get over that now. At least we'll know that he's going to be available for Anfield, so it is what it is. Let's see. On our ability to respond to defeats, he said, we will try to play our best. We love winning, and the team is desperate to do anything it takes to win games. We showed that against Aston Villa when, in my opinion, we were the better team and should have won the game. We will try against Brighton, who will make life very difficult for us for sure. The last time we lost, when we lost to Newcastle, I think we won 5 on the bounce after that in all competitions. So, yeah, this team doesn't have the same lose 3 games in a row that the team did a year ago, like a year prior to the last year. This team can respond and win games, right? And so it's all about using whatever you have to your advantage. We're more rested, we're better, we're in better form, we're at home. All of those things should go in our direction. And, you know, we should be beating Brighton at home, and we need to, because we need to get back into good form, right? On the latest team news, he says Martinelli is feeling good. We have no other news apart from Mo. Mo had to be subbed, blah, blah, blah. Mohamed El Neni's not going to be available. So how will we survive? But Martinelli is feeling good, which is good. So he was like ill, so he should be ready to go. On the importance of a win against Brighton with Liverpool coming up, it's just taking one game at a time. I do feel like oh my God, if we lose to Brighton, then we have Liverpool. We really just need to focus on Brighton, right? But he said, like every week, in the end, we have to play against every team. The schedule is what it is right now, but we have 2 big games coming up, and then we have as well the 28th and the 31st. So this period is very vital around this moment in the year. We will try to win every game, that's for sure. On what we have, on what he has made of Brighton's start to the season, they've been really good. I think they have taken another level playing European football. They've been really successful. You see last night what they did. They've done a lot selling players. Like, no matter who's there, they tend to kind of look like themselves. The system never really lets itself down. Now they leak goals, but they always score goals, and they're always very dangerous. And so, yeah, I mean, even I thought that they were really poor against Chelsea, but they only lost 3-2. So this is not a team that is in like any sort of like terrible form. They're in inconsistent form, but they're not like bad, if that makes sense. So they're a very tricky opponent, and it could go one of two ways. They could either be kind of like in a haze of excitement from getting to the next round in Europa League and a little bit tired or whatever, or they can come in with like, let's go, let's see if Arsenal are still reeling from losing against Aston Villa, right? And so they talked about De Zerbi's like passion for the game. We know one rule for De Zerbi, another for Arteta. He's just as passionate and annoying and stuff like that as Arteta, but everybody thinks it's cute when he does it, right? Plenty of fixtures in the January or Christmas period, which is why it's important to make sure that you're using your squad properly so players are not like out in the cold. I think Fabio Vieira probably put himself out in the cold anyway. So, and he also is injured. So it is what it is. But you're going to have to use Trossard and Jorginho. All of these players are going to be important. Reece Nelson is important too. All of these guys are important because you just never know when you're going to need them, right? He talked about the high profile manager thing as well, which I think is total bullshit. Him getting different rules because he's at Arsenal just feels like total is like so ridiculous, and I don't know why that's even being considered. But like I said in my earlier show, I do think that like they just don't want like managers. Like if Gary O'Neill says something, people don't listen. But if Arteta says it, it gets retweeted, it gets posted, it gets talked about on Talksport and Sky Sports and all this stuff and ESPN and blah blah blah. So I think it's more about not that he's a high profile manager, so he deserves harsher punishment, but it's when he talks, people listen. So we have to try to figure out a way to silence him. They spoke about Reece Nelson's performance against PSV and if he'll get more minutes moving forward. He says, I think he had a really good game. As you said, he was really lively and really brave in his decision making. He generated 3 or 4 big situations. This is really important, by the way. So we're going to spend some time on this. I think he had a really good game. As you said, he was really lively and really brave in his decision making. He generated 3 or 4 big situations. He worked so hard, and he had to be subbed at the end because he was cramping. I think he had a really positive impact on the team. So remember when we've had these conversations about, is it the system? Is it Kai? Is it, the system is hindering our wingers from doing blah, blah, blah? Did the system look like it was hindering Reece Nelson from doing anything against PSV? Honestly, like Arteta said, he made 3 or 4 big situations, and he was really brave in his decision making. He decided to take players on. If the system was that, players have to get the ball and turn back, then why is Reece Nelson not getting the ball and turning backward? Is the system actually holding our players back and the wingers are not getting freedom? Or are they not being brave enough in the final third? Arteta said after one of our games before we actually like clicked a little bit that we need to take more risks and we need to be braver. So I don't think Arteta's saying that in the press and then turning around and telling them to not take their man on, make bad decisions in the final third, not dribble, not, Reece Nelson was really good against PSV. I think he was like Arteta said, he was really brave. So this whole idea that Arteta's telling our players to not do anything in the final third is total bullshit. And I've been saying it's been bullshit for a while. Like, I think when our players are not playing well, we try to figure out a way. If they're players that we like, Saka and Martinelli in particular, when they're not playing well, we have to make it about Arteta instead of, when they get into the final third, it's up to them what they do. I think that we obviously have, positioning off the ball and stuff like that. But the idea that Arteta's telling Martinelli to play this way, but Reece Nelson is getting out there and creating big situations and taking men on and being creative and, doing shit on the ball just kind of underpins my feeling that Martinelli just needs to make better decisions and be braver. It's on them. If they're not willing to express themselves, that's on them. If they're scared in the big moments, that's on them. He's not going to tell Reece Nelson, a lesser player in his team, that you have freedom of the pitch and you can do whatever you want. But Martinelli and Saka, who are better, you have to do nothing. You just sit around, do nothing. So no, for me, it was always bullshit. And I think when you read between the lines there, he said he was really brave in his decision making. He generated 3 or 4 big situations and he worked so hard. So yeah, it's not the system. Those front 4, front 5 need to figure out ways to create more chances on their own. They need to take their men on. They need to be more aggressive. Arteta's not going to tell you not to create chances. Reece Nelson just was really good on the day, really direct. His dribbling was really good. He just wanted it. I think sometimes like you see our players, they're really confident like they are in the Champions League. And maybe it's just they're getting in their minds about the deep block and, not being as, good in the Premier League attacking wise. And it's getting in their head. And instead of just being the players that we know you are, you're overthinking everything, so never really bought into that whole idea that Arteta was telling them not to attack, not to take their men on, not to be creative in the final third. That all felt like bullshit to me. Like, this is Arsenal. Be freaking for real. He talked about on if there's any motivation for revenge after last season's defeat at home to Brighton. He said it was a really tough day losing at home the way that we did with the last goals we conceded. It was very painful. It was like a dream was almost over, not mathematically, but a big part of it. It was a really tough day. Like I said, that was basically the last knife to the title challenge. We went into the Nottingham Forest game playing with Partey at right back for no reason. I think we all kind of knew it was done and dusted, and we kind of wanted it to be over because we knew we were not going to be able to catch up to Manchester City. We had already lost ground. We needed to stay ahead of them. We were never going to be able to catch up from there. And so, yeah, I think there's not really much in terms of team news because we know who's available and who's not unless we get a big shock. But I would imagine the team that always kind of plays will play. Unfortunately, we're not going to have other options at the back. That's really where we're struggling right now. So I imagine we're going to see Raya and White and Saliba and Gabriel and Zinchenko and Rice and Kai Havertz and Odegaard in the front 3. It's just a matter of whether the front 5 decide that they want to take the game to Brighton. And if they want to be the players that we know that they're going to be. Kai Havertz is doing well. Rice is doing well. But the other 4, they've been inconsistent, not scoring enough, probably, especially when you think about Gabriel Jesus and Martinelli in the Premier League. And so, it's time to switch it on. It's time to switch it on. You're at home. There's nothing preventing you from being creative and exciting and explosive and aggressive at home. You have to get it done. One other player that I'm thinking about as well is Ben White, because he'll probably be up against Matoma. He has not looked that great in the last couple of weeks. I know that he was dealing with an injury, but even since coming back, he hasn't looked like himself. He has got to be switched on against Brighton. Otherwise, he's going to be on the barbecue, cooked like nobody's ever been cooked before. So yeah, let's see what you guys are saying. Lucas says Dross, Daoud, Gross-Daoud and Ferguson were on the bench, they will probably start against us. Kamal says, not just the fullback because Nelly did well last year, but the difference is Xhaka was overlapping him so he could get more central. I mean, I don't know if Arteta's telling them not to switch positions. I don't know if he's telling, or I don't know if I really agree with that. And I don't really remember Xhaka overlapping that much. I think it was more Jesus was going out wide and Martinelli was going central. I think, yeah, Xhaka did do the triangles, but like was maybe did yeah, Xhaka did overlap sometimes, but sometimes Tomiyasu and Zinchenko do overlap. I think this like thing where he never gets the overlap. Zinchenko and Tomiyasu were overlapping, not every single time, but again, I've seen too many times Martinelli get into the final third and not make the right decision. So, he has to take responsibility for the times that he does get into the box. And even if it's less, um, even if it's less, that doesn't mean that he can't be effective at all. So for me, it's kind of like Kamal is saying, it's definitely a mix of both. But this idea that like it's just because the system has changed, it's just because of Kai Havertz, no overlap and blah blah blah. That doesn't really account for the times that like he gets into the box and just makes the wrong decision. He has to find a solution. Like Saka took responsibility and said he's going to find a solution. Martinelli has to do the same thing, and he's so good at like he is going to find a solution when he does. Like we'll see it, and maybe it'll be against Brighton. I think he has all the ability to do it, but I think sometimes we let them off the hook because we like them so much, but sometimes they're just not playing well. Um, you know, Lucas says he was underlapping and Jesus was wide more. It's a combination, like I think Kamal said. I don't think it's just all, one thing or the other thing, but you know, if this was somebody else that we didn't like as much, I think we'd be a little bit more hard on them doing the right things when they do have opportunities. Um, but Martinelli is going to be fine. Everybody's going to be fine, but I don't anticipate Brighton sitting in a low block, so it also might help us that Brighton tend to be quite open and very expansive, but that also opens up, the reality that they could also hit us. So our defense is going to have to be on its best behavior, and that also, you have the Zinchenko thing. So we'll see how everything works out. But I personally think that we're going to win the game. I think, I'm going to go with the old faithful 2-1. I don't think we'll blow them away. I think they'll score, but they'll also concede. It's just about not being stupid and giving up a goal in like the first couple of minutes. I really did not love how we gave away a goal in the first 6 minutes of the Aston Villa game, and the fact that we couldn't come back was giving 2021 Arsenal. That's not good enough. But I'm really excited about the game, and hopefully we get the win. But yeah, you guys, we're not gonna do like the whole like do the lineup and all that kind of stuff because we kind of already talked about it. But I actually want to check the poll before I get out of here and see what you guys are saying. If you guys haven't voted on the poll, you guys can for a couple of more minutes. But OSIMHEN in the summer has 55%, and Ivan Toney in January has 45%. So, I mean, there's not much between them. You guys are kind of, split up, which is interesting. Richard says this season so far, his Martinelli final ball has been lacking. A lot of wayward crosses and passes. When he does play well, he's unplayable. Let's hope he gets back on form on Sunday. I agree. Let's hope he gets back on form because we need him. Like 15 goals, we need double digits from him again. And that doesn't mean that his teammates don't need to step up. Like sometimes he does put in really good passes like he did for Saka against Aston Villa. But this season, it has felt like he's just not as sharp. Like, I just don't think he's as sharp. And maybe that's the injury and stuff like that. But some of this is on him, you know. Lucas says, I'm not defending Nelly. I'm just saying how we played. Fair enough. And Boy says, Xhaka was doing a lot of the things with his movement last season. It allowed Zinchenko to look more responsible than he actually is. And Jamrock says, I think Ivan Toney to loan in January. So yeah. All right, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I really hope you guys enjoy your weekend. I hope you guys enjoy your Friday and all that kind of stuff if I don't see you. But like I said, we're going to do the player ratings immediately following the game after the Brighton game. So make sure you guys are available for that. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.